What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Planet Soccer Show. I'm your host, Reed Simpson, along with my guy, Dylan. We are here today, episode whatever number this is, talking about the U.S. versus the Netherlands round of 16 game out in Qatar. We're 1 week closer to getting Alexi Lawless off of our TV. Unfortunately, though, the men's national team has been eliminated. We're going to talk about it. First of all, Dylan, how are you? How's your weekend been?
Been a good weekend outside of the game, I suppose. Had a nice little Friendsgiving gathering, plugged the pod a couple times. Yeah, it was a pretty disappointing start on Saturday.
Plugged the pot a couple times?
Podcast.
Okay. I was like, damn, Friendsgiving really did a number on
you. But yeah, outside of the game, it was a good weekend. But that game, man, that really stung. It was we heard all leading up to it. We were finally turning the corner, finally being that new side that Berhalter promised us that other countries would take us more seriously than in the past, and we had the exact same performance we always do in every World Cup. So here we are, thinking things had changed, and they did not.
Netherlands kind of they made a fool out of us tactically. We'll talk about that. At 8:56 a.m. On Saturday morning, Reed Simpson tweeted, "TCU and USA winning today." By the way, that was the start to a very, very bad day to be Reed Simpson. I watched the USA lose on my phone while standing in the obnoxiously long concession stand line watching TCU lose the Big 12 championship. So pretty brutal early Saturday for me. But, speaking to the World Cup, this is about where we expected us to get. I did have, see my tweet. I had some good feelings going into this one. But the Dutch just tactically, they made us look like fools. We all assumed that they were going to take control of the game, handle possession, take possession, and go and score. And they're like, you can think you know what you're doing against us. You can think your midfield's going to come out here and boss us, and you can think you're going to hold on to the ball. And this is one of those examples. If you look at the SofaScore attacking momentum chart, it is wildly inaccurate of how this game went. So I'll put it up on the screen right now. But, I saw bits and pieces of this game here and there. Dylan, I think you saw all of it. So I'll pretty much defer to you.
Yeah, I will say, I think looking at that attacking momentum, we were on the front foot for the majority of the game, but I think it was by design by the Dutch.
One of those on the front foot where it's designed by the other team to
they're letting us be on the front foot because they know we don't have a goal scoring forward. Right. Like there's nobody in our front three that is nearly as scary as their front two. And I think it was very clear that they were wanting to score on the counter because they knew they could. They knew they could expose our back line. They knew that being on the ball as much as Dest and Robinson were, because that is how we play, is kind of through those backs at times. They would be tired. They knew they would be tired from the first three matches. I think you can tie some of this performance back to a draw against Wales. I think if we win against Wales and we can rest guys against Iran, I think we look a lot different, a lot more rested. We looked tired. All game we looked tired.
If you win versus Wales and then draw, well, I guess England's goal differential might have still put them in first.
Yeah, because of how bad they beat Iran.
Yeah.
So I just think that it stems from a lot of things, but I think for me the biggest thing I noticed was the lack of legs. And that was kind of a question about our strategy and our tactics going into the World Cup, is we wanted to play aggressive. We wanted to play high pressing. And I think it worked great for us for 3 games. But we just didn't have the legs to hang with the sides and the class of the Dutch. I think the back 4 defensively back 5, if you want to include Tyler Adams, were abysmal. And we hadn't seen that. Jedi and Dest probably had the best game offensively of anybody in the first half, but defensively got burned a couple of times. We'll kind of go through the progression of the game and kind of break down the goals a little bit. But I think Tyler Adams and Jedi, I don't even think it takes us soccer pundits air quotes for those of you listening and not watching. We are far from actual pundits. But I don't even think it took anybody that knows soccer to know how blatantly obvious it was that those two goals were on them. And that's something we hadn't seen out of those two. I think they're two guys that you and I had been praising for the first three matches. So it was disappointing because I think everybody was kind of on the same page. Like, all right, here we go. We're actually turning the corner. We might not beat the Dutch, but we will put up a very good performance. And it was one of the worst performances I've seen us put out in quite a while. So it was really frustrating and a huge letdown.
Yeah. I guess let's go ahead and start talking about the midfield. It's kind of a midfield performance that, from what I heard and what I saw, it differed from the previous three performances at least as far as having those legs under them and being able to be a motor throughout the game. It wasn't quite there. You spoke a little bit to Tyler Adams. I think you can pretty much peg him responsible for that first goal. Just didn't track his man, didn't track that kind of edge of the box.
Which is just not
30?
him.
Yeah.
Which made it all the more frustrating. I mean, we were talking about, I don't think he probably would have been on my best 11 of the tournament so far if I wasn't a U.S. fan. But as a U.S. fan, I was like, yeah, you kind of got to consider it because he was absolutely he absolutely bossed the England midfield, and we were terrified of the England midfield, most of us going into that game, and he proved his worth. So I did not expect to see this from him in this game. I think it likely can be attributed to tired legs because of how much he was asked to do early on in the tournament, and he just didn't have the legs to hang with the Dutch most likely. But at the end of the day, it's the 30th minute of a round of 16 game. Like, you got to still have legs. If that happens in the 85th, you go, all right, maybe he should have been subbed sooner. Maybe he should have been subbed. Maybe he shouldn't have played 90 minutes every game the first three. But we're talking 30th minute of the biggest game of your life. Like, that, I have a hard time saying that individual play was just legs. He fell asleep. But what was frustrating specifically about it, what for me was the guy passed, Depay passes him. He had position on Depay passed him. And then there was no sense of urgency to track back further. So it's not like he just got burned and then busted his ass and Depay is just too fast. It didn't look like he tried. I don't know if it was a communication breakdown or what it was, but as soon as that happened, I was like, oh boy, we are in trouble, because the first 25 minutes we were really on the front foot. It was kind of weird and surprising. And then you saw exactly why they were letting us play with so much of the ball, because they knew they could do exactly that to us.
Yeah, an interesting stat on Tyler Adams. He had actually run the most of anybody in the tournament. I've been searching for hustle stats, essentially running stats for the World Cup. Haven't been able to find it, but they said on the broadcast that Tyler Adams had run just over 24 miles in those first three games, which is crazy. Obviously, you do the math. That's 8 miles a game, which is kind of wild. But yeah, I mean, I think, Yunus Musa probably also started to show his tired legs, and also just being a teenager or a 20-year-old. He looked, to me, it looked like, from what I saw, Tyler Adams and Yunus Musa were two players that, I don't want to put this on them, but maybe they were starting to listen to their own, or clip their own newspaper headlines a little bit. It looked like they had lost a little bit of their edge in this one. Now, Weston, he wasn't, he played a good game, but you could tell he had been steady from the first three games to this one, and that might be a little bit attributed to some of the bigger games that he's played in, and just knowing how to pace himself and how to stay level-headed. And he's played probably close to a dozen. Well, no, I don't know how many Champions League games he's played at this point, but he's used to playing on the biggest stage, and he just looked like he had his head more on his shoulders than maybe Tyler Adams or Yunus Musa did in this one. So the midfield they took a step back in this game. They still looked fine for a lot of it. We created like 1.49 XG, so there was constant creation of chances. It's just also tactically, like, the Dutch got in transition so quickly, and Frankie de Jong was able to kind of feed either side of the pitch so quickly. They got on the break and were able to really confuse us and confuse our back line, and get Matt Turner out of position, or not even out of position, but just in the position that they wanted him to be in. It felt like they were puppet mastering this entire game.
Yeah.
And that kind of started with our lack of it being able to dominate the midfield, which is what we did in the England game and why they weren't able to do this to us. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't have much more to say on the midfield other than it was really disappointing. And Musa disappeared for 10, 20 minutes at a time. And then when you did notice him, it was not positively. It's because we had the ball for those 10, 20 minutes. And then as soon as we didn't have the ball, you're like, oh, there he is.
Yeah.
Somebody's blowing by him again. You know, Depay's just coasted right by him. So it was really disappointing performance from the midfield. I do think of the three, Weston was the least disappointing, but by no means was I overly happy with his performance. I just wasn't screaming at the television when he was on ball or tracking back. He played a fine game. He played, like you said, I don't think he went up or down really from his performances the first three games, but the other two took massive step backs. And I think that's where the loss really mainly stemmed from on the field. There's other, obviously, managerial decisions that we'll get into, but as far as the players themselves go, I kind of put it on those two mainly.
Before we move on from the midfield, Dylan, do you have the SofaScore page pulled up?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to put the heat map of the three midfielders up right now, and now. And Dylan, you click on Musa, Adams, and Weston McKennie. Look at where they spent their time on the field and tell me there was any sort of organization or any sort of coaching to what the Dutch were going to do. I mean, look at these heat map, guys. You couldn't tell what position Musa, Adams, or McKennie were playing. They were all over the place. Absolutely no concrete positioning, which is fine a lot of the times. But then you think in the context of the game, and you're like, this is what the Dutch did. And you can tell our midfielders were just running around with their hair on fire half the time. I literally just clicked through it. I'm like, yep, Musa. Oh, wait, he played right mid. Why did he spend so much time over on the left-hand side? Oh, wait, McKennie was a left mid. Why did he? Yeah, it's... And
then you look at their midfield, and they were very consistent in their positioning in contrast. And I think that goes back to coaching, management, and experience. Again, we've said it all tournament. This is I believe it was technically the second youngest roster, but consistently it was the youngest starting 11 in almost every round, if not every round. I don't know for sure, but average age in this match was 25, and the average age of the opponent was 28. And that's a big difference. And again, ours is 25 because we have Tim Ream and Walker Zimmerman. I mean, you take those
like 23, 24.
Right. You take those two out of the equation, and they're not going to be around next World Cup. And it's a team that will be in that 25 to 28 range again, but with a World Cup of experience under their belt. So I think that it's a learning experience for the midfield. I think all of us here stateside may have gotten a little overzealous based on the first three performances. I think when we previewed the World Cup and our group, we all kind of touched on it wasn't the strongest group, so maybe we got a little full of ourselves and a little excited based on some performances against a somewhat weaker group. But at the end of the day, this is going to be a midfield that is very successful. They just were not at all against the Dutch, and Louis van Gaal had his way with them.
He did, very much so. Moving on to the attackers, we'll start with the striker up top, the new addition into the starting lineup, which it felt weird.
Who was it?
Jesus Ferreira. Yeah.
Oh, I sorry, I wouldn't have known, and I watched the whole game.
I think the situation you bring Jesus Ferreira into is that Iran match in the 75th, 77th, 78th minute to be your pressing striker because he's got high energy, he's got the legs. And I thought you wouldn't have had to use him in the knockouts because he's probably your third best striker as far as actual talent goes. Just a really weird inclusion into this match. I don't know what Greg thought he was doing with this. But Jesus was, like many of our strikers have been outside of Sargent's, decent performance against Iran. They've been pretty invisible all tournament, which is a problem moving forward if you can't identify somebody. But Dylan, what did you see out of Ferreira by just not seeing him?
Yeah, I mean, it was disappointing. I somewhat understood. I thought I understood the inclusion. I think it may have been a much different game than Greg foresaw happening, and I think that's why we saw the sub when we saw it. But if the game was that different, I think waiting till the 45th minute, like after halftime, is too late, because we're at that point down 2-0. And I think it is one where you get enough subs these days with the 5 substitutions. You could have subbed him off in the 35th. And I was making fun of him a little bit, saying I didn't notice him on the pitch, but it is a little unfair, because I don't think the way this game went was what we brought him onto the field for. So I don't think we had the game plan that we thought we were going to need to have. This is one where Gio Reyna up top would have been perfect. I think it would have been a risky time to do it, but if we would have known the Dutch were going to give us so much of the ball, I think Gio would have been the selection, and we saw that with the substitution at half. So Ferreira didn't do anything for me, but I do think it was a little bit more due to the Dutch game plan than him himself. I think he just got kind of put into the wrong situation for him to succeed. But sticking with the attackers, I didn't hate Gio Reyna's performance. It did leave me a little bit to be desired, but gave me a whole heck of a lot more than Ferreira. So I do wish he would have started. I think it would have made a lot more sense, been a little bit better in our build up, because we just didn't have that final look in that final third. A lot of solid build up, but like that last ball or that last touch just wasn't there. And I think part of that is because Ferreira was in a position that he wasn't going to succeed in, and that's a spot that Gio would have performed better in. So it's also a little hard to judge him on a performance when he came into a game down 2-0. And his midfield was absolutely just getting bossed on everything. So yeah. He didn't play great, but I think he played as good as he could have given the situation. And I mean the result just wasn't there in that final third, and it was frustrating as a whole from that front three. I think Pulisic and my favorite was Haji Wright, but I think Pulisic and Weah both played very, very, very well. I was a huge Weah fan. I hated when we had to take him off, but you could tell he was getting tired. I was screaming at the TV that we took him off, but Haji Wright came on and played really, really well. And it kind of begs the question for me, why was he not getting more minutes? Because when he did come on in this game, he looked very, very good. And I think he could have also filled into that striker position a lot better than anybody we trotted out there in our starting 11 the first 4 or all 4 games. So that was good to see progression from him, but also a little frustrating seeing how well those 3 played together up top. And it was a last minute desperation, throw it at the wall, see what sticks, and not something that was worked out on the training ground in full or put into motion in one of those group stage games, because asking them to do it at that point against a Dutch side buzzing with confidence, led by one of the best coaches in the world, was a tall task.
Yeah, you go in, you make the change at halftime, which to tell you how close I was paying attention to the game, I didn't realize Gio Reyna was in until like the 70th minute. And I looked up at the TV again in the concession line. But what's kind of discouraging to me is, okay, you make the one change at half. It was just one change at half, right? I think it was.
Yeah. Yep.
Ran in for Ferreira. And then you're sitting there, you're like, okay, down 2-0. You get to the 50th minute, down 2-0, 55th, down 2-0, 60th, down 2-0. And like at the 60th, I'm thinking, okay, like why aren't we changing anything up? Like, you change the one thing up, change something else up. Like,
right.
You're down 2-0 to a Virgil van Dijk led defense. And I mean, you got to change something up. And Greg waited until almost the 70th to make his next change, which it was 2 changes at one. It was Aronson coming on for Weah and Haji Wright coming on for McKinney, technically, is how they put it in.
At that point, it was get all of the forwards on the field we can.
And it felt not only desperate, which I would be fine with desperate because you had to be, but it also felt a little too late. You also just felt like the Netherlands was probably going to bag another one.
Yeah.
Despite how the momentum was going, which the U.S. pretty much dominated the second half outside of like a 10-minute spell somewhere. I don't really know where this is on the attacking momentum chart. It looks like right before we score our goal. So 60th through
Yeah.
65th minute. It looks like the Dutch really dominated. I don't
Yeah,
know.
as soon as we made those substitutions, Yedlin, Aronson, and Wright, we looked phenomenal for the next 10 minutes. Got a goal, and you started to feel confident. And then the biggest, in my opinion, probably a worse breakdown than on the first goal. But that was just a backbreaker. 4 or 5 minutes after we pull it within one, we're buzzing because we looked great in those 10 minutes before that first goal. So you're thinking we're going to be able to keep the foot on the pedal, and it's absolutely monumental breakdown. But I thought our front five, if you will, because that's pretty much what we were playing with in that last 30 minutes. I thought they played really well together. I was very impressed, but it did kind of raise the question, why weren't we experimenting with this a little sooner instead of doing it in the 60th minute against a very solid Dutch team, because they were able to produce against a very solid Dutch team. So if we had employed that tactical idea or that attacking combination against Wales, I think we would have easily scored in that second half. And I think we maybe could have scored against England even. So that part of it's frustrating. For future, it's exciting knowing we do have, while we don't have that like pure goal scoring striker, we do have so many good forward attacking position players at our disposal. It's just, are we going to have a manager that can get the most out of it?
Yeah. I'll trust your judgment there. Backline. Let's talk about the center back pairing. We've already kind of touched on the fullbacks. We discussed a little bit via text before the game, the CCV benching or the Walker Zimmerman return to the starting lineup. You told me, okay, if we think the Dutch are going to have a lot of the ball, which I won't fault you for that. Everybody thought the Dutch were going to control the game. I was thinking, okay, even so, CCV looked so good, and
he was,
and it ended up being the opposite, where we never. I get you don't want to use your in-game substitutions on your center backs because they move the least amount. You want to use them on your wingers and people that need to get a break, but. Zimmerman wasn't necessarily.
That's not even a good excuse though for Greg. Like I was giving Greg his flowers the first 3 games, but that's not a good excuse because we didn't use our 5th sub. I mean, you can say we did on Jordan Morris, which is so ironic, in the 95th minute or whatever it was, but we didn't use it. So that's kind of I don't know. That's kind of a cop out excuse because as soon as you see, again, I would have center back one, I may have waited until halftime, but I probably would have tried to make a move for bring Gio on in like the 35th when you can very clearly see what Netherlands is trying to do. And then if it's still that way up until half, you make another switch for one of those center backs to a ball progressing center back. Because if we were going to be on the ball that much, especially in that middle and final third, I want center backs that can make that stretch pass. And we saw that from CCV against Iran. And I've not really seen much of that from Walker Zimmerman. Defensively, he played fine. I think he got a lot of crap, and rightfully so, after the first 3 games because he was a liability at times. But defensively, he played fine for me. But it was just a frustrating decision and just another example of Greg being Greg.
Yeah, Louis Van Gaal after the game said that he was surprised that the USMNT did not adapt or adjust to Holland's tactics. I'm
not surprised.
Yeah, we were all sitting there like, really? You're surprised?
Where have you been?
That's a pretty damning statement from me, though. Like, to not, normally at coach speak, you would have a team, you'd have a coach credit his team, be like, yeah, our players came out, executed. It might be different with soccer. I'm not completely familiar with coach speak in soccer because honestly, a lot of it's just in such a heavy accent, I can hardly tell what they're saying half the time. And other times it's just, you can chalk it up to that media being different over there. But with this statement, he didn't credit, I don't necessarily know the context of the question, but he went right to like, yeah, they didn't adapt or adjust. And even if you get a question like, were you surprised that the U.S. didn't adapt or adjust? You would say, Yeah, I was a little bit surprised, but our players just really executed our plan. He came out and
Right.
just dagger right to Greg, which was pretty telling to me.
And that's an example where leading up to this game, as I said, everybody's like, this is a different USMNT program now. This is a different side. Maybe Greg has done everything he told us he was going to do. But the fact that we have other coaches coming out saying like, I can't believe they didn't do anything different. Like that feels so typical USMNT, same old, same old. We're just getting outclassed by managers. And it's, I after group stage, I was ready to give Greg another year or two, like give him at least the Gold Cup and see what happens. But like this performance alone is almost a fireable offense. Like it's just embarrassing, and it's even more embarrassing when the oldest coach in the tournament is coming out just ripping you in the media for how poor your tactics were. It's not like this is some young. I mean, Louis Van Gaal is probably the best quote at the whole World Cup consistently. Like he's always giving banger quotes in interviews. But still, you just got ragged on by a 75-year-old Dutch coach because you couldn't adjust to him. Like that's, as you said, that's pretty damning and pretty embarrassing and pretty same old USMNT to me.
Yeah. It just shows you how far we might still be behind, like mythology or not mythology, methodology wise, and just kind of where our mindset's at and where the U.S. program is as a whole. The Europeans are still laughing at us, unfortunately, which I do think we gained some respect in this tournament with the way the youngsters played. I think especially Yunus Musa. I saw him a lot on Twitter, with Premier League fans and whoever saying, drop 20 mil on this guy. I think his valuation's like 17 or something like that. But I think overall the team and the program did gain some respect, but it definitely took a step back in that last game, without a doubt. Yeah. So Matt Turner, I think is the last one to talk about. We kind of talked about the fullbacks. Did you want to say more on the fullbacks? Robinson and Dest.
What the hell was Jedi doing?
Defending.
Like that was defending. Why? Like, I mean, I really am struggling to put words on it. It was that shockingly awful. Like, yeah. I watched a lot of bad Newcastle soccer in the past, and you didn't see stuff like that even. Like, and not from Jedi either. Like he always seems to be very aware of what's going on around him. He seems to have a pretty high soccer IQ. So to double mark somebody at the 6-yard box and leave somebody trailing back post wide open is incredibly shocking, and frustrating. And that was a backbreaker. And that's what made it worse too. Because because of how close it was to our goal. It was almost like we got so excited that we had this momentum that we just shut our brains off is what it looked like. And it was disappointing. But Matt Turner was awesome, man. I mean, it's hard to say that about a guy that gave up 3 goals, but he's not stopped. Like none of those 3 were his fault. Like even the one that was kind of center high part of the box took a funky deflection, I think, blind goal. So I thought he played phenomenal. He stood on his head at points, keeping us in a game that we didn't really have a ton of business being kept in. I know his like technical rating wasn't very good, but he had 4 saves. I think 2 or 3 of those were probably from within the box. So I was really pleased with him. Still looked like a giraffe on roller skates a couple times playing the ball, but got the job done. And the announcers even commented, like, I guess some of the players have been asked about it in the past, and the players have, of course, they're going to say this, but apparently the players and the coaching staff have all the confidence in the world in him on ball, and they actually prefer him on ball to any of our other keeper options, which as a fan, I'm like, dude looks so uncomfortable. But in his defense, like you don't actually, like this tournament, we didn't actually see him make a mistake on ball. So I was super pleased with him. For me, it would probably be him as man of the match, honestly, for me even, because I think he played really well despite giving up 3 goals, which is hard to say.
I mean, if you look at the XG on the 3 goals he gave up, for the most part, they were, I mean, especially that first goal. And I struggling to visualize the 3rd goal, honestly, but there was not a whole lot that Matt Turner could have done differently. I think he got like 6.4 SOFA score rating or whatever, but with that, it's like if you just let in goals as a keeper, you're going to go down, which is a little bit unfair, or a lot unfair.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and wrap up. Just do a short wrap up of the U.S.'s tournament, kind of last thoughts. Do we extend Greg? Do we, move on? Who do we move on to? Things like that. You have any coaching thoughts, Dylan?
Back the Brinks truck up to Jesse Marsh.
Yeah.
Pay him Nick Saban money. Like, bring that dude in. I highly recommend anybody listening to this, go listen to his interview with Men in Blazers. It was really insightful. Kind of took some digs at Greg and his tactics at time, and you can tell he's sitting there watching every U.S. game with a pen and paper, like visualizing what he would do with the side. And I know there's no actual expectation that he's going to leave the Premier League. Like, I'm like kind of a Leeds fan now. We both kind of are, but part of me is hoping they get relegated so he does jump ship. Yeah. He's like, all right, I don't want to go coach in the championship. I'll go take the U.S. job. But I know that's not very realistic. I don't know enough about U.S. coaching tree, honestly, outside of him. So it's kind of hard. It seems like we're kind of on this track where we want to hire an American again. It seemed very important in the Berhalter hire, and I don't know if that's going to change with the Federation. I would be open to changing it. Bring me Roberto Martinez. Like, why not?
Mauricio Pochettino.
Yeah. That's like Nick Saban and like Brian Kelly money combined to get him out here. So we could throw like dream names out there all we want, but I don't think either of us are quite in tune enough with I don't think either of us are quite in tune enough with the international coaching carousel to really make any educated guesses. Or predictions or desires, but I would like to see it explored. I think every U.S. fan would like it to be explored. I was a Greg sympathist, as everybody's kind of heard throughout this World Cup at times, but it's kind of the straw that breaks the camel back. He was building up some good grace and lost absolutely all of it in this round of 16. And I don't think it is because we bowed out in the round of 16. I think you said it at the top of the show. I think if you told us we were finishing second in Group B, get knocked out by Netherlands in the round of 16, we all go, sounds good, see you in 2026. It was just the optics of how it was done that is so frustrating and makes me sick of him.
Yeah. Man of the tournament for us?
I don't even know now. It was Tyler Adams until
I'm going to go Timothy Weah. I'm going to go Timothy Weah.
He got our first goal and looked very good consistently, so I don't hate that one. It would have been Tyler Adams through group play for sure for me, without a question, but I think he was severely lacking, as we said, so I would struggle
once
to
he got
put
to
him.
mile 31 of this World Cup, he was like, yeah, I'm probably done.
For me, the one I think I would probably pick, again, I can't believe I'm saying this because he gave up 3 goals in a knockout game, but Matt Turner, I think part of it might be tooting my own horn, because I was on the Matt Turner train all the way back in the beginning of qualifying when everyone was Zach Steffen. So I was.
You pay attention to Arsenal backup goalkeepers.
He wasn't, or New England Revolution at that time.
Whoop-de-doo.
So I know. Honestly, I saw him. I believe in one of the first qualifying matches. We gave him the start, and I was really impressed with him. I think he's the best shot stopper in the country by far. And I think he put together a pretty good performance, and mainly his performance, albeit in the 3-1 loss in that last game. I was really pleased with him.
Yeah. What else you got from this tournament? Anything?
Not really.
Christian Pulisic. I think we should give a shout out to Christian.
Yeah.
He came in. I'm so damn sick of that Volkswagen commercial about him laying on the therapist's couch.
I loved it when it first came out, but it's like every commercial break of the World Cup now.
I know. I do think that Christian exercised some whatever demons he had with this U.S. team in this World Cup. He got his goals. One of the best goals of the tournament, sacrificial goal. And I think he showed a lot. He doesn't have to be the Messi of this team. He really doesn't. There's enough talent around him, but he was he's still kind of like the father of the team right now, it
Yeah.
seems, which is wild because he's 23. But I think getting his goals and, kind of being the face of this team and getting his, praise on TikTok, whatever he wanted out of, becoming that national face of soccer in the U.S. I think it has fully transitioned from the Landon Donovan to the Christian Pulisic. I think enough fans watched him score goals, and the way he scored them and kind of the storylines around him, that he is the face of U.S. soccer now. And I don't think you could say that before, especially with casual fans, it's important to make that distinction because obviously anybody who watches the European game knows that Christian Pulisic is the U.S.'s most talented player right now, and should be the face of the sport. But so many people still see Clint Dempsey, Landon Donovan. I don't think anybody still sees Alexi Lawless. I don't know if anybody ever did. I'm tired of him being referred to as a legend. I don't care if he's in the U.S. Soccer Hall of Fame. I really don't. I mean, Alexi, just step down and please let.
Yeah, right. Dude loves it. He's not going anywhere. He will be Lee Corso in the 2058 World Cup or whatever year it falls. Like, dude's going to be around for a while. You got to just get used to it. He's not going anywhere, unfortunately. Yeah. I can't stand him.
I do want Fox. Well, I don't know. I want the Golazo crew to stay on CBS for the Champions League, but I wish. Here we go. CBS, please, for the love of God, buy the rights to the 2026 World Cup so we can get Kate, Thierry Henry, Micah, and Clint on together, and Jamie. That would just be absolutely brilliant.
That would be awesome.
It's funny how much I care about the pundit, watch that I do.
Well, I think for growing the game, it's important though.
Yeah.
And
so much.
I think, a casual tunes in and has to listen to Alexi Lawless scream at them. That kind of turns you off from the sport, and you're like, all right, dude. But if you get the funny, good hosts that also provide really good insight to casuals and experienced fans alike, I think that's a lot more valuable. I will burst your bubble though. Fox already does have the rights for 26.
Damn.
So
I figured they probably did.
There goes that. Yeah. Maybe they can work something out. Maybe they can take the Golazo crew on loan or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that pretty much finishes off this episode. Wraps up our coverage of the U.S. team in the World Cup. There is still a great tournament going on, obviously. England and France quarterfinal.
Kylian Mbappe is going to put 3 past Baby Arm Pickford, and I can't wait. I'm kind of pulling for England. I have enjoyed watching them this tournament. And
I just think it's hard to be an international Premier League fan. You can't not you've got Trippier. I've got Kane. We all love the Foden's and the Sakas. They're just a hard team to root against.
But I hate Pickford, and Mbappe is him. That dude. The goals he had today were unbelievable. I'm glad to see him. I know we kind of dog on him a bit, but he is probably the most talented footballer in the world right now, and it's nice to see him returning to form and showing out for the world. So any casual fans, take the opportunity because this guy is crazy special.
He is. Yep. We appreciate you guys listening to the Planet Soccer Pod as always. We'll talk to you all probably later this week. Make sure to like, subscribe, share, download, follow, and comment. Y'all have a great night. Peace.